It's been over half a year and a new balance patch was just announced. The Balance Council, which exists out of pro gamers, has been working hard on this patch, and now we finally get to see the patch notes. Now, I did see that this was not the official Blizzard patch notes thing that I usually release, but as far as I know, Blizzard doesn't really do anything besides implement the patch notes, so I guess the only way this patch doesn't go through is if you guys, the community, push back on it too hard and say the patch sucks. Otherwise, these are probably pretty official. Now, before reading it, what my own idea of balance is that Terran and Zerg are relatively even. I think Zerg probably looks a little bit stronger, but it's even enough, and then Protoss is lacking a little bit behind. I've been seeing a lot of wine threads about Protoss being too weak, which are, I watch some tournaments that are definitely very strongly exaggerated. Protoss looks like a pretty strong race, just not quite as good as Terran and Zerg. So what I would expect from this patch myself is to make Protoss like a little bit stronger at that top level without making it easier. That's very important. It's something they've done wrong with Protoss a lot of times. And maybe increase the variety in builds a little bit for TVZ in particular. When I tried to play some more standard games outside of my usual memes, I found that it was not that interesting, in particular TVZ. Like, I know there's new builds coming out, like 2 Rex Reaper and all that, but really what it all is, it's just new glorified versions to play 3CC before rallying bio across the map or sitting back and playing Ghost. At least you have 2 options, right? But besides that, it's not that great. So that's what I'm hoping for. So let's see. There's a lot of changes, by the way, so I'm probably going to go through it quite fast. Patch goals: make Protoss more stable on a professional level in the early game versus Terran and more competitive against late game Terran armies with Ghost. Just reading this sentence alone, it gives me a little bit of doubt, but then I read the second part, or the second sentence. Increase the variety in the mid-game and late-game army compositions by reducing the strength of certain units in large amounts, bailing, disruptors, ghosts. And that's exactly what I was getting to, because Protoss in the late game seems pretty good against Terran, or, at least it's even, but it's really only because of Disruptors. If Disruptors didn't exist, I think Protoss would be pretty trash. So if you find yourself in like one of those big army fights and for some reason the Disruptors have all fired, or there's not enough, or they're not there, then the Protoss army usually just crumbles. So this is a pretty big part of it. And I'm very happy this includes the Bailing. Like, there's a lot of complaints about certain units such as Ghost, Disruptors, Widowmines, but the Bailings 100% belong in this category. Bailings very often are the reason why I turn off streams of really big matches. Because sometimes I'll see, let's say it's a PvZ, the Protoss is doing a really good job defending, and then the Zerg has so many Bailings, they roll through the buildings. 2 of them roll in 2 different mineral lines, kill 40 probes, and that's it. And it's similar against Terran. Like, rolling 50 Bailings to do a planetary, it's not the most exciting thing ever. So I like that. I do think they're going to struggle with that a lot. I don't know what the change are here, but they're going to struggle with that a lot. Making Zerg really balanced without Bailings, that's a tough one, because the Bailing is definitely, they're a little bit over-reliant on it, I would say. Make over-specialized units, Cyclones, Mothership, and Infestors viable throughout more stages of the game. Cyclone Mothership for sure. I'm not quite sure if I agree with Infestor being in this row, because the Infestor seems like a pretty great unit, honestly. To me, the Infestor feels like it's in a really good spot, because it's decent in the mid game. If you're creative, you can find some use for it. It's good in the late game. You obviously can't make it in the early game because you need an infestation pit for it. So I'm not quite sure if I agree with Infestors being in that list, but besides that, seems fair. Bring more visual clarity to important units on the minimap, as well as relevant abilities like Widowmine targeting and Disruptor's cooldown indicator. Yeah, for me, that's just a plus. I mean, it's very annoying to not exactly see where the Widowmine is going to drag and losing 14 probes to it and just dying. And similar to when you're stimming into a bunch of Disruptors, sometimes it looks like they all have a Nova, but they don't. Sometimes you think none of them have a Nova, but then 3 of the 8 do. And it's very hard to tell, and you can just lose everything. So for me, I mean, I'm just always for that. I mean, it seems very basic, right? Like, it's just really like quality of life. Promote more interaction in late game scenarios by making units such as Tempest, Mothership, and Broodlords more maneuverable. Okay. I mean, the goal, I agree. The way to do it, I'm not 100% sure about, because, I mean, I've been playing since the start. I'm not quite sure how long you guys have been watching or playing for, but the Broodlord has been, like, quite literally the most oppressive unit in StarCraft 2 history when it was too strong. So I'm always freaking terrified of that unit. Okay, Tempest kind of gives me the same vibe. I think maybe the better way to achieve that is by, doing something that they've mentioned before, like taking back the power of Ghost, taking back the power of Bailing, so Terran can get more on the map. For Protoss, I'm not 100% sure how you would achieve it. I guess giving some power to the smaller units instead of like the Disruptors could be an idea. I do feel like buffing units like 10% Brutal Lords, that's a little sketch. But all right, let's get into it. Terran oh my god, I wait. Okay, Terran Cyclone. I thought this was like an entire list of changes, but these are just the changes for the Cyclones. Okay, I'm not quite sure how I'm ever gonna, figure out what this even means, but all right, let's try. Cost reduced by a lot, tech lab requirement removed, health reduced, armor reduced, supply cost reduced, auto attack range increased, auto attack damage now 11 plus 2 armored. Right now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not even 100% sure how much damage the Cyclone does. I want to say it does 20, but you just never use it because it's too bad. So I only know what the lock-on damage is, so I don't even know if this is like a huge nerf or, I'm not even 100% sure, especially with the cooldown here as well. Like, I don't even know what those numbers are. Lock-on now uses the Cyclone auto attack damage. Okay, so the auto attack or the lock-on damage is going to go down for the Cyclone. But it is going to be impacted by upgrades. Before it wasn't. Before it was mostly just, you didn't need to get upgrades when you were playing Cyclone mech because it doesn't do anything. Neither does getting armor against it, right? Lock-on no longer has a delay for first shot. That sounds like quality of life. Lock-on cooldown removed. Okay, well, that sounds kind of crazy, though. You can just kind of lock onto everything? Okay, I mean, I'm not sure if it makes a huge difference, but it sounds kind of crazy. Imagine putting that on rapid fire. You're just kind of like lock onto everything. Okay, I mean, obviously, you can only lock onto one target, right? But it sounds kind of funny. Cast range reduced from 7 to 6. Okay. Max range reduced from 15 to 9. Okay, talk about a change. Yeah. All right. Multiple Cyclones they can now auto cast lock onto the same target. That's pretty good. Well, what it means is before, let's say you have a carrier, right? And you have 10 Cyclones. You would have to press C, which is the lock on hotkey, and click on the carrier many times. Because if you A move, only one of them locks per target. But if it's a big target, it's actually kind of annoying. Now, at the same time, no, actually, it doesn't matter. I was going to say at the same time, this is weird. Like, let's say you fight against 10 Stalkers and you want them to lock onto all of them. But since lock-on has no cooldown now, I guess that doesn't really matter. Magfield Accelerator upgrade removed. Okay, so that's kind of the snowball extra attack damage upgrade that's removed. Move speed reduced significantly. New upgrade increasing move speed to 5.1. And the goal or the idea behind it is redesign the Cyclone to make it more all-round unit in all matchups. Aims to increase the viability of mech-based gameplay against Protoss while promoting more active engagement with mech-based armies. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, guys. I feel like usually I have a pretty good idea. I'm really good at learning new patches, new units. I have a pretty good idea what it's gonna look. But this, I feel like it's really just too much information. It feels like a very cheap, very weak unit that is supposedly faster with the upgrade. The first thing I thought of is that it's going to be pretty weird to play against Terran because now the Cyclone is kind of the catch-all against Terran, so you can counter Liberators and Banshees, and now it's not that strong. So maybe in Terran it promotes more different early aggression, which I guess is good, unless it creates like a, rock, paper, scissors kind of thing where you just kind of hope your aggression is good against the others. But for the macro games, I don't know. My first idea is that this is not going to make mech that much better, but I will really just have to see. Now, these are the big units being changed. All right, let's see. Snipe damage reduced from 170 to 130, plus 40 versus Psionic. Now, what does that change? You kill Ultralisk in 5 snipes, I believe, instead of 3. Brute Lords probably still die in 2 snipes. I'm not 100% sure, actually. They probably still die in 2 snipes. I think Ravagers still die in 1 snipe unless they have 140 health. I imagine the 130, they've thought about this, right? Like, they've discussed a lot. It's usually a specific number. So I would guess one of the Zerg unit probably barely survives. So maybe the Ravager survives on 10 HP. I thought the Ravager had less than 130 health, to be honest. I thought it was like 125 or something, but maybe I'm wrong. And I think this is a good change. I feel like this is something that definitely has to get accompanied by some kind of Zerg nerf later on. But the mass ghost, if you guys haven't watched recently, the TVZ meta really is mass ghost sitting behind planetaries and kind of just like putting your snipe on rapid fire. So you snipe everything and that's it. It's not super exciting. So I think that's a good change, at least if it's accompanied with something Zerg nerf related. EMP radius reduced from 175 to 1.5. I mean, I can, without even reading the goal, that is just a PvP change, right? A lot of people think EMP is great against spellcasters, but it's not even that, really. Like, EMPing infestors and stuff is not even that common. It is really just EMPing Protoss units and making them very weak. Like EMP counters everything that's Protoss, like quite literally. I don't even know what maybe the probe. The probe is the least countered by an EMP because it only does 20 damage to it, right? But that's just what it's for. Like EMP right now, you click 3 EMPs and the entire Protoss lose half of their HP basically. So that's what that nerf is for. Reducing the radius of EMP will encourage Protoss to use Psystorm in the PvT matchup and help in straight up engagements versus Terran armies. I actually disagree with the first part. Just like I said, EMP is not necessarily the counter to Psystorm, I think. Like, EMP is only the counter to Psystorm if you clump up all of your High Templars, but very often the High Templar is in a Warp Prism, it drops and it storms, or there's only one. And you don't, especially if you have limited EMPs against Protoss, you don't want to make that many ghosts because of Disruptors and Colossus. You have limited EMPs, you're not going to EMP twice on one Templar. Keep in mind, one EMP doesn't drain all the energy. So I don't think that's really going to change much for Storm at all. But it is going to help in straight up engagements. That's just true. Like I said, EMP counters everything that Protoss has, basically. Snipe will no longer one-shot units like Zealots or Roaches. No! Guys! A classic uThermal tactic has been nerfed. I don't think anyone uses this, so it doesn't matter. But my tactic has been nerfed. You guys know those Protoss players that don't make gases and they just make mass Zealots? They have like a big army that'll be like a couple Colossus and 500 Zealots. I like to just make like 20 Ghosts against them and snipe 20 Zealots from the start. It's not going to work anymore. Well, maybe it's for the better because it's probably a crappy strategy anyway. And Roaches, I guess that's fine, as well as requiring an extra shot to kill Ultralisk in the late game, generally reducing their cost efficiency over time while still being able to kill important spellcasts such as Vipers. Doesn't seem like an enormous change, actually, besides against Ultras. I mean, Zealots and Roaches, that really doesn't matter, honestly. At least I don't think it does. You're going to EMP Zealots over sniping them, and Roaches, if you already have a ton of ghosts, like, why are there still Roaches on the field, you know? But making Ultralisk a bit better, I think that's what people usually want, so that's pretty good. Widowmine. Drilling claws now make the Widowmine unburrow twice as fast. Targeting line is more visible. I discussed the target line before. That's obviously a good change. Drilling claw makes it unburrow twice as fast. That is probably to make the Widowmine, make the Widowmine a bit better after the slight nerf that they got in the recent patch. I have not really played Biomine against Zerg, so I don't know if it felt a little bit too weak. I do think that it makes sense because Widow Mines are basically what stops Zerg from just playing mass Ling Bane, and that's it, right? Until they get like Ultralisk or Infestors, they don't have to make anything else. And this is going to make Zerg have to maybe add like a unit always to that. Like, I think it's really cool if Zerg goes for like Hydra Ling Bane or opens with the Roaches and then goes Roach Ling Bane. And Widow Mines being a bit stronger might make that a little bit more likely. Though I don't think it's going to make a massive change, to be honest. Like, you're going to save your Widow Mines a bit more. You can micro them better, which is cool. Micro changes always pretty cool. I don't think it's going to be a massive change, though. Medevac speed upgrade replaced with Caduceus Reactor increases energy regen rate by 100%. Minimap radius increased from 0.75 to 1. Okay, well, this is very interesting because the Medevac energy upgrade, correct me if I'm wrong, has to be the least used upgrade in the game. Like, does anyone build that? The only time I see people build that is when it's a TVZ late game and people are just making the upgrades for fun. But I never even see it used. Like, it's like the most useless upgrade ever. So the fact that it's something different is cool. And this means you might need less medevacs in the late game. If it is an active game, if they somehow manage to change the game into an active game with this patch, then this would be a cool upgrade. Whether it's gonna be super useful, I don't know. But I always like changes, and like I said at the start, I want the meta to be shaken up and stuff, so that's really cool. And this just means that the medevac is bigger on the minimap right now. The medevac is smaller, and it's actually pretty hard to see. Now, at the highest level gameplay, it's probably not the biggest deal because everyone knows the timings of, let's say, when a Widowmine drop arrives, so they know when to look. But if you don't know that, the medevac is really small and you could very easily die to a Widowmine drop, so I think it's a pretty good change, to be honest. Interference Matrix now requires an upgrade. Okay, cost 50/50. That's extremely cheap. That's like concussive shells. Everyone is going to forget it because it's too cheap. That's what happens. It's a nerf, guys. You need to make it more expensive so people don't forget about it. 57 seconds research time. A single Raven open can currently disable multiple key defensive units in the early push against Protoss. The cheap cost of the upgrade still allows for multiple Raven play in TVT and specialized builds in TVP. Yeah, seems decent. I can see it. It's just I always struggled myself playing against Colossus. But I can totally see that it's very frustrating having two Colossus. You know, you spend your entire early game making two Colossus, and then one Raven is like, and disables them both, and you can be kind of screwed. So I can see that, and it's cheap enough. Yeah, I'm kind of on board with this, actually. I can totally imagine some Terrans complaining about this, but I think it's all right. And in TVT, Ravens are always so dominant in the early game that it's probably nice to make that a little bit weaker, to be fair. Like, maybe TVT is going to be even a little more fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong and people are going to be like, no, TVT sucks now. Now we actually have to move our stuff. Sure. But I think it's all right. I can live with that. All right. The Zerg Changes. Adaptive Talus move speed bonus removed and the cost reduced. Okay. Yeah, no, for me, without even thinking about it, for me, this is 100% a yes because I hate lurkers. And sorry, I know it's a very nostalgic unit for like the Brood War, or very iconic unit, I should say, for all the Brood War fans and stuff. But lurkers in StarCraft 2, it's a weird unit. It's supposed to be a siege unit, but then it's super fast and it sieges instantly and it's invisible. It was just not quite right. So removing the move speed, I think that's fantastic. Makes it actually more like a siege unit instead of just, you know, this turbo unit that kind of just runs back and forth with really long range. It's just, I don't even necessarily think it has been overpowered recently, but it's just not quite right somehow. So they removed the move speed. I think against Terran, it is a very strong unit. So I think against Protoss, probably people don't care as much, but against Terran, it's a very strong unit. So I imagine Terrans around the globe getting pretty happy with this. And it's going to make them a little bit cheaper. That only seems fair. Let's see. Wait, I should probably read the goal. Some of the main counters to the lurkers are getting nerfed. Oh, the ghost, probably. And the disruptor, I suppose, because that's what they said in there. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. I guess that's a good counter to, like, I don't know how much HP a lurker has. Does the ghost actually take more snipes to kill it? I guess it takes less damage if you snipe it once, at least. By 40, which is a pretty significant amount. Now, the Infestor Pathogen Glands upgrade removed. Infestor starting energy increased from 50 to 75. Very brave. Okay. I don't think it's an enormous deal, but pretty brave. Fungal cast range reduced from 10 to 9. Fungal growth damage reduced from 30 to 20. Okay, so if you guys don't know what Pathogen Glands does, it's basically the second sentence. It makes it spawn with 75 energy, so you can fungal instantly. Now they're removing that upgrade, so as soon as the infestation pit finished, you can make infestors, and they're going to be useful right away. And you know, for that, they're going to make fungal growth a little bit weaker, which sounds fine. I mean, fungal growth being weaker, it's, you know, I talked about the Broodlord before that I'm scared of it. Fungal growth was the combination with the Broodlord, right? Like fungal growth plus Broodlords made it so strong. So fungal growth being a bit weaker, it's nice. I mean, it's mostly about the stun effect anyway. But in some situations, it can actually kill a ton of units. So yeah, I would say this is all right. I wasn't as into the infestor change that I read in the intro because I thought infestors were already pretty fine. But yeah, if you read this over here, it makes sense. Since the infested Terran ability was removed, one of the best changes ever, by the way. Absolutely ridiculous ability that was. The infestor has no utility until reaching 75 energy. True. Fungal damage and cast rate is reduced to prevent infestors from killing Marines with 2 consecutive fungals, and as a trade-off to the EMP radius nerve in TVC late game. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would say that the Marine thing is probably bigger than the Ghost thing. Like I said, Ghosts, you don't really use them to EMP spellcasters as much as you would think. Like, Ghost against Zerg are used for snipe, and against Protoss, they're used for EMP. I mean, sometimes if a Zerg is not paying attention, they have 10 Infestors clumped, you can throw an EMP, of course, but it's not the main use of it, so I don't think that's the biggest deal ever. Air armor upgrade reduced cost from very high to normal. Okay. This seems like kind of a random change, but it doesn't seem like a stupid change. It just seems random that it was that way before. Air Army just, you know, yeah, exactly what it says here. Generally considered less useful than the air weapons upgrade despite being more expensive. I think you only get it against Mutalisks, right? I think you only... Well, maybe against carriers too. Like if a Protoss rushes carriers, you get it for your Corruptors. But besides that, yeah, I guess it's not... yeah, seems kind of funny. I mean, I don't really have anything to say about that change. It just makes sense. Consume damage reduced from 200 to 150. This is 100% because some Zerg players kill their hatcheries on accident, you know? So it reduces the attention required for gathering Viper energy. What it means is Zerg players have killed their hives one too many times, okay? We're going to reduce it. I think it's all right, to be honest. Like, it feels pretty silly when a Zerg loses a game because they kill their own hatchery. Obviously, they could pay attention to it, but it's also not a deal breaker. I feel like this is more like a quality of life than anything else, you know? I guess in some ways you don't really want to make the game easier, but... most of the time, I guess you just use it on like your extractor, or you make some evolution chambers for it or something. Yeah, I think it's fine. But I do think it's funny. We're going to miss out on the comedy of Zerg players killing their hive now, which is unfortunate. All right, the Brood Lord. I'm scared, guys. Someone needs to hold my hand for this. Move speed increased to 262. Okay, Broodling move speed reduced. Hey, does that mean it also get nerfed for hatcheries? That means if I kill the AI's hatchery in my 1v7 challenge, they're not going to kill my Marines as fast. Let's go. That's huge. Broodling health reduced. Broodling attack speed reduced. Okay, so the Broodlings get a nerf, and the Broodlords get a buff themselves. They're just faster. Okay, I mean, I always felt like these kind of changes, like they feel so small. Like, I bet someone is going to play against them and be like, man, they're like freaking Ferraris right now. But realistically, it's pretty small, right? Like, they're getting a little bit of a move speed buff. Yeah, I mean, if the Infestors are a little weaker, the Lurkers are a little weaker. It's probably fine. I think they're still going to die in 2 snipes to a Ghost, like I said. I think it's probably okay. I would personally rather have them, give that power to other units. Maybe like the Ultralisk, or maybe like, I don't know, the Hydra or something. I know it's not necessarily a late game unit, not the fan of the Broodlord itself, but it seems reasonable. Further increasing Broodlord mobility while further reducing the strengths of Broodlings. Yeah, makes sense. I don't have too much to say about that. I feel like one tricky thing with the Broodlord is always that when there were too many, they would block every unit on the ground, like Thors, or it doesn't matter what you had, Marines, Thors. So now the Broodlings are significantly weaker. So I think it just makes up for that. I think the Broodlord might even be weaker after this, but they're just more microable, which I think is nice. Overlord, deceleration speed increased. Generate creep delay reduced from... Okay. Reduce the amount of time it takes for Overlords to stop and begin dropping creep to allow for more active uses of queen drops. Okay, I feel like this is one of the changes that was suggested by Zergs that just like doing those queen all-ins, that they don't get to do anymore. Like, think about it. Like, what the hell? Well, what are you going to use queen drops for otherwise? You're going to trick me into thinking you're going to spread creep all over the map with queen drops? If someone does that, I'll shout you out, okay? One of the top EU Zergs, whatever, doesn't matter who you were. If you start spreading creep like crazy with queen drops, respect, okay? But for now, I believe this is really just gonna be like for better all-ins or whatever. I personally, as someone who's trying to make more content for Zerg and Protoss in general, I do like buffs to fun plays. So for me, as a non-competitor, I like seeing stuff like buffs to Overlord drop. So for me, I like it. I'm not quite sure if it's indeed just for all-ins, or if they're actually gonna, start dropping creep every. That would be very cool evolution, by the way. Like, I feel like that's like the ultimate update of the Zerg, that they start dropping creep everywhere. That'd be awesome. Transport upgraded, move speed increased, move speed pneumatized. Okay, so they're just gonna make... How do you even call them? Dropper Lords, I guess, is how I usually call them. Once you morph them into a Dropper Lord, they're going to be faster. Yeah, it seems fair. I mean, Overlord drops are cool. I like them. They're pretty strong, but they're not oppressive or anything like that. I think they're pretty cool. Whenever Zergs do it, it looks cool, so I'm down. And now, it's time for Dropper Lord to Grandma. No, just kidding. Let's see. The Ultralisk cost reduced. Unburrow time reduced. Okay. Lurkers and Broodlers are generally favored over Ultralisk in the late game, as Ultralisk have poor cost efficiency over time. Should make them more used throughout long games while not greatly reducing the initial investment. So why are we burrowing them exactly? I mean, I don't have anything against it, but why, So they're getting, like, really slightly cheaper, 25 minerals. Okay, I'm going to say something that's a little controversial about the Ultralisk. I think the Ultralisk is a fantastic unit, actually. Most people think Ultralisk suck. I think it's a fantastic unit, but they just suck in like the ultra late game when people have Ghost, or when people have, let's say, a ton of Immortals. But there's times when Ultralisk are freaking fantastic. Like sometimes in PvZ, when there's not too many Immortals, they're super good at trying to snipe the High Templars, right? Against Terran, they are the best unit in the game. If you haven't transitioned to like Marauder Ghost yet, if you're stuck on Marine Tank, a couple of Ultralists will just absolutely mop you up. So, I mean, this change is very small. I don't think it's going to make that much better. But I think an approach they could have is make Ultra slightly weaker in that like initial transition, and then slightly stronger in the late game. Because if you buff it right away, they're just going to be like Zerg's going to be rushing Ultralisk and just A-moving you, and that's not what you want, right? So I don't know. I'm still wondering why you're burrowing them. Are you? I guess you could dodge snipes, but by the time Terran is sniped, they probably have enough scans, right? Hydralisk speed plus range upgrades combined. Increase the speed at which Hydras come online in the mid-game for more quickly responding to enemy air switches and Mutalisks, and supplement weaker Banelings against ground. Oh, I'm so excited about the Banelings. Against ground-based armies. Strength of Hydra-based timings will be monitored versus Protoss during the testing period. It's nice that they put this, because a lot of Protoss players would be like, what, are you crazy? I also think the Hydralisk is a better unit than most Zergs give them credit for. Hydralisk is pretty good against Terran. I think for a long time it was the safest way to play against Terran, play Hydralisk Ling Bailing. You would say Serral played a lot, the best ZVT player usually, of course. So this is going to make them a bit better. It basically takes 2 upgrades and morphs them together. For Terran, I don't think Hydralisk timings are a problem, so Terran probably doesn't care. Protoss might have to be a little afraid, though. Like, I can totally see, especially if there was a long period where the hero style was popular, which was basically mass Zealot Stalker. And the Hydras were pretty good against that, so I think that style falling out of fashion, that style falling out of fashion might be a little unfortunate. So it's good that they're testing it, right? Now here we go. The Protoss changes, the Bailing change. Sorry, give them to me. Bonus damage per upgrade received from 2+2 versus light to 2 versus all. Does that change the probe mechanic? Oh yeah, look. Oh, there we go. That's one of my least favorite things. I was just talking about it actually at the start. One of my least favorite things. Will no longer one-shot probes or drones with +2 attack. One of the worst things I watch in PvZ is Zerg clicking 20 Bailings to the Protoss mineral line. The Protoss has almost perfect defense, but 1 Bailing gets through and kills 20 probes. Awful. Now it's 2 Bailings. No, I mean, it doesn't sound big, but I feel like it is pretty big. Like, just literally 1 Bailing connecting on the edge. I see it very often. 20 probes gone. So that is beautiful. Beautiful change. Doesn't matter for Terran. Beautiful change. Centrifugal hooks cost reduced. Research time reduced, health bonus removed. So this is the Bailing speed upgrade. Bailing speed upgrade is going to be cheaper and slightly weaker. Which I mean, that sounds nice to me. Like I mentioned before, Bailings are very strong, and I don't really enjoy the way they work. You mass them and you A-move them in, and it's just not very cool. And now the health bonus is removed, which I think I'm not 100% sure. It could help tanks one-shot them without needing any upgrades for them. So if you're playing tanks without +1, you can kill the Bailings without needing +1. I think it's something like that, or maybe you need +1 instead of +2. I'm sure there's a difference there. Maybe it says something here. Reduces some of the strength of mass Bailing army in mid-game, and reduce the volatility of defending Bailing when buys are requiring multiple Bailings to kill workers. Exactly. The speed upgrade will require less of an investment to maintain a similar balance for 2-base Terran and Marine tank-based all-ins. Yeah, that sounds fair. It's gonna, it's a little cheaper and it builds a little faster. So you're gonna have Bailing speed on line against Terran all-ins, which I have seen a decent amount of, which I don't quite understand because I thought they sucked, but apparently they don't because better Terrans use them all the time. But the health bonus is removed. I mean, I like this. Like I said, Bailing changes. I was looking forward to them. And I feel like this is pretty fair. Keep them so they can defend Terran Alliance, but still nerfing them in meaningful ways. That is great. All right, the Protoss upgrades. I think this is what most people are interested in because Protoss has been suffering a little bit in tournament performances. So let's see. Shield upgrade cost reduced from a lot to normal, just like the air armor upgrade for the Zerg, right? Yeah, I mean, that seems fair. It was always crazily expensive anyway. I mean, if you think about it, it's pretty weird for Protoss that they need to get 2 armor upgrades for their units, right? Now, obviously, the game is balanced around that, so it makes sense, but it's pretty weird. But then to have it be super expensive as well, that's a little crazy. I guess it does work for... Like, it does say shield upgrades are less useful, but it does work for every unit, right? That is something that you might forget. It does work against every unit. So if you have carriers and ground units, you don't need air shields and ground shields. It's just shields. So I'm not quite sure you could say they're less useful. But for both air and ground units in different scenarios, easy against Terran armies with Ghost. That's true. Ghost remove the shield, so then only the armor is useful. Dude, imagine, I was just thinking about that, right? Imagine if there was only shield upgrades and no armor. The armor works for the health and the shields for the shields, by the way, obviously. If EMP would remove all their armor, that would actually be freaking crazy. So they should be pretty happy that they're split for now. Well, yeah, current change helps increasing cost efficiency ratio of the shield upgrades. Yeah, I think it's fine. I feel like they were always super expensive. Once again, probably not a huge change, but they were always super expensive for no reason. Yeah, this is the same thing. I don't even want to comment on this because it's literally the same thing. Arrow rate armor cost reduced from very high to normal. Same answer as for the Zerg one, really. Warp Prism minimap radius increased from 0.875 to 1. Okay, so the medevac, it's really funny seeing these numbers sometimes. The medevac was 0.75, and this is 0.875. I mean, that's fine. I think a big thing that's really annoying about medevac drops and prism drops is you don't see them, and then you're just dead sometimes. Like, let's say you get dropped as a Protoss, you don't have recall. Let's say you're moving out as Terran and you don't see the prism and there's 12 Zealots being warped into your base. Like, you're just dead. So I think anything that's helped the division, that's nice. Obviously, you don't want to make it too easy. You want to have people actually look at the minimap. Imagine if they made those dots so big you could see it in like the corner of your eye. That'd be quite something. Your else would be very weak. But no, I think it's a fine change, similar to the medevac. It is a pretty funny number that it was 0.875, which is a little bit bigger than the medevac, but not normal. But yeah, that's fine. Disruptor. Oh, the unit that I'm interested in as well. Supply cost increased from 3 to 4. Model scale reduced by 9%. Radius increased from 0.5 to 0.625. Okay, so they cost more supply. That is, I guess, done so you can't mass them as much. That's usually what they do when, yeah, you just mass a unit too much. And disruptors are very massable. Against Terran, at least. I really don't think you can mass them against Zerg. But against Terran and Protoss, totally. I'm not sure why they make them smaller, though. I'm actually curious what they're going to say later. Radius increased from... Yeah, so they're going to be a bit less clumpy, I suppose. So maybe you can't have too many... Oh, that's done for the clarity, I suppose. So it's a little smaller. And they clash more. So basically the unit stays the same. If you guys understand what I mean. But they're more separate from the other disruptors, so you can actually see if they have a shot. That must be what it is. It is currently hard to tell which disruptors have purification nova available and when are clumped up together as the models intersect with each other. Exactly. The goal of supply cost increase is to reduce the potential of mass disruptors armies while still allowing Protoss players to use disruptor as a strong mid-game and late-game tool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, pretty much what I said, so that... Yeah, nothing else to say about that. It makes sense. I don't think it's a buff or a nerf, really. I think it's like, well, maybe it's a slight nerf if you consider that we can see them better now, right? That's pretty cool, I suppose. We can see them better now, so that's kind of a nerf. But yeah, I mean, they're still going to be roughly as strong. They're not going to be massed as much, which I think is successful. Void Ray Prismatic Alignment moves speed with Flux Veins increased from 2.6 to 3.5. This is just a bug fix, actually, I think. Right? Let's see. Oh, no, it is a buff, actually. Okay, let's see. So before, there was a bug where if you had Flux Veins, which is the Void Ray speed upgrade, and you activated the Prismatic Alignment, the thick beam that deals extra damage against armored, they would be slower than without the speed upgrade. So now they're actually making them fast. And I can kind of see it because Void Rays, they're probably one of the worst Protoss units right now. The scary part about buffing Void Rays is that we just, I think maybe like 1 year ago it was, we recently came off a meta where every game in PvZ was Skytos against Queen all-ins. And I did not watch a lot of... I'll be honest, I did not watch a lot of Pro StarCraft in the time because it was awful. Every game was a camping Skytos player or a Queen all-in Zerg player or both. So now they're buffing the Void Rays, but it's a late game buff. Yeah, allows for players to actively micro Void Rays in late game engagements without needing to cancel Prismatic Alignment. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, Void Rays have very clear counters. EMP is a good counter because they're very clumping. Parasitic Bomb from the Viper is a good counter. So is Fungal for the same reason. So I don't think that's going to be oppressive, but making them a little bit better, I'm down for that. So pretty good change there. And obviously fixing the bug is that's always pretty good. Tempest acceleration, deceleration increase from 2.1 to 4.2 doubled. Okay, radius model scale reduced by 10%. So they're gonna be smaller and easier to micro. Improve the feeling of actively microing Tempest as a slow acceleration makes them feel slow to respond when not already moving. That's very true. If you ever get like Vikings or Corruptors too close on your Tempest, it feels like they're just all dead. You might as well not move them. So that makes sense. I do still want to add a little bit of caution to that, as what I said at the start. It's one of those units that can feel pretty oppressive. You're just getting beamed from, I think they have 15 range against air. It's not fun if you can just never catch them, right? So a little bit of caution needs to be had there, but it's definitely true that it feels awful to micro Tempest because they're just so freaking slow. I guess making them smaller is just a kind of the same thing. And yeah, I think that's my main thoughts on this. I would exercise a little bit of caution here, but I can see it, especially for the feel. Oh, this looks like a... Oh, that is a really big change. Huh? This is like the Cyclone list. I hope I can make some sense of this one. Cost reduced from 400 to 250, 250. No, all the minus 400 memes are gone. If you guys don't know the meme, every time a mothership dies, the entire chat is full of minus 400, minus 400. This meme originated because you would just see a mothership get abducted and die and be completely useless. But then even in games where the mothership was super useful, they would still post that. So I guess, yeah, the meme is gone. Supply cost reduced from 8 to 6. Build time reduced by, was that 35 seconds? Speed increased. Lateral acceleration increased. I guess that's how it, like a mothership moves kind of weird. I guess it kind of like spins around. So no longer makes the mothership lag behind other units, okay? Radius decreased. So it's going to be smaller, cheaper, faster, less supply, build faster, no longer has energy, so it can't be EMP'd. Okay, recall now is 110-second cooldown. Recall radius reduced from 6.5 to 5, so it gets nerfed. Timer now is a 60-second cooldown. Slow reduced from 50 to 33%. Radius decreased. Cast delay reduced. Okay, so it does cast faster. Cloak field is no longer passive. It is now an activated ability which lasts for 10 seconds with a 50-second cooldown. Okay, so summary. It's cheaper, it's faster, it builds faster, it's less supply, it accelerates better, it's smaller, and the abilities are weaker in turn, and it can't be EMP'd or feedbacked, I guess. Does anyone ever feedback? Does anyone ever feedback a mothership? I don't know. The cloak field is no longer passive. It's kind of the craziest thing here. Because that is really, really iconic for the mothership, right? That it just cloaks everything. I do think that is the strongest part of the mothership, and I'm not sure I 100% agree with this because on one hand, it is a bit oppressive. Like, let's say you don't have that much detection. Let's say you're a Terran that's on 4 bases, which is 3 orbitals usually. You need to drop some mules. You don't have a lot of scans. It can feel pretty oppressive to have an entire cloaked ball. But on the one hand, it also really fits the mothership, and it's not. I don't really think you can say it's too strong. So even if the mothership was a little weaker, I guess if you get it out really fast, I mean, they probably thought about it way more than I did, right? At least I hope so. Else that would be pretty tragic. So it makes sense, but to me, I'm not 100% sure. I would kind of like to see it in action to see what that is even gonna look like. I do like that they're making some changes to it because there's been so many complaints. There's so many Protoss players that think that's literally an F tier unit. So it's nice to see some changes there. Reduce the investment and increase the maneuverability of the mothership and prevent it from being hard countered by EMP. Should allow for earlier mothership builds in all matches as well as more active usage of the mothership. Yeah, I mean, seems fine. I guess the mothership is a pretty cool unit, right? Like one of the coolest things I could think of with Protoss is recalling it to someone's base. And I do really like the outplay potential there is. Now, the recall has a 110-second cooldown, so you can't spam recalls, but you could technically have an army on the left, recall into the main, and then when they get there, you can recall it with the Nexus. And if you can do that earlier, before there's like mass Sky Zerg out or Sky Terran or whatever, that sounds pretty cool. All right, I like the explanation here. That's kind of a vibe. Guardian Shield duration increased from, by 2 seconds basically. Allows Guardian Shield to be precast before engaging Terran armies evolving Ghost, lasting longer into the fight. Okay. I'm not sure about this one because I think the Guardian Shield is already pretty great, right? Like Guardian Shield destroys bio damage. So this is another nerf involving Ghost. I feel like this is maybe like a little too much. Like, I don't necessarily mean that it's going to be an enormous deal. I just know if it was necessary. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a change I'm necessarily going to complain about, but maybe it's like a little too much. Like, I don't know. I feel like the Ghost EMP radius is decreased. I feel like late game, you should never have too many sentries because it's just it's a weak unit outside of its ability. So why would you have that many, right? So if you only have 1 or 2 sentries, I would imagine that it's not that difficult to have one a little bit further back so you can do Guardian Shield. So this kind of leans a little bit more towards making it easier rather than better. So I'm not 100% sure if I like this one. Oracle Stasis Ward's side range increased from 4 to 7. Allows Stasis Wards to be used for more central map vision with Stargate-based openings. Okay. I did hear some Protoss players talk about this, that the biggest problem of Protoss is map control, so you don't have as much map vision. If there's a Raven out, you get your observer snipe, you don't have as much map vision. You can make pylons, but they get sniped as well. So I guess that is just one thing that goes in that direction. I don't think it is anything that's gonna, be too annoying to play against. I mean, the fact that it sees you doesn't mean it can scoot over and still put your unit in the stasis, like it's still just gonna be there. So yeah, I think it's fine. I think stasis are I mean, they're pretty well used. Maybe they're going to be a bit more used now. What I do like about this change is that they are buffing the Oracle in some way. Because I feel like recently Protoss basically has two openers. They play Phoenix into Colossus, or they play Blink Stalker with a Robo. But you don't see the Oracle as much, even though the Oracle it's a fun unit. I mean, it has been really overpowered before, so chill out, guys. Don't buff it too hard, please. But it's a really fun unit. It has a lot of abilities. If a Protoss player is good with it, it's beautiful. So yeah, I like it mostly for the part that it's a slight Oracle buff. I don't think it's going to be super meaningful, but if it helps them, see the map a little more, die a little bit less to a medevac that they couldn't see on the mini-map before, I think that's great. And then the last change of all of it, barrier will now also block the first instant of damage, which triggers the barrier. Okay, counts towards 100, yeah. Currently, EMP hitting an Immortal will drain all of the Immortal shields, as well as activating the barrier, which will generally expire before the Immortal ends up taking other damage, making the unit heavily fall off in the mid-game against Terran. Okay, so what this does is it counters one EMP, I suppose, right? So you EMP it and then you EP it again because the first EMP doesn't do any damage. The thing is, I feel like Immortals are already quite good against Terran. And I have really enjoyed, I'm not quite sure if you guys watched the last big tournament. I really enjoyed Classic's PvT game style where he would play Mass Immortal Disruptor. Like, that was very, very cool. And this is going to make them a bit stronger, which I think I like because that style was very cool. I'm not quite sure if the Immortal needs the buff, though, because in my mind, it 100% makes sense. Because the Immortal, the biggest thing that it has is that it has this shield that absorbs, a little damage initially. It's very tanky, and that gets completely deleted by the EMP, so it makes sense. But what I notice mostly in game that actually happens is that Immortals are just used to absolutely annihilate Marauders, which they still do. So I'm not quite sure if they need it. This is going to make Immortals even stronger, which on one hand I think is cool, because I like the style. Like, it's very cool to see that style. I would like to see it more. On the other hand, I also am not sure if it's necessary. All right, so that's all the changes. It's a lot to process. I thought I was going to do this in like 15, 20 minutes, but this was so many freaking changes, actually. I really wonder which one of these are actually going to make it to the patch and which ones they're going to tweak slightly. But I thought it was interesting. I feel like they're finally working on actually making a huge patch that changes a lot of things. In the previous, I'm not in the balance council anymore. I left a while ago because I thought it was kind of frustrating arguing about balance. But before, I feel like people were so stuck to like their own competition that they would not concede any points to like the other races, right? So it'd be really like, no, you can't nerf the Widowmine by 0.01 because it's going to make us weaker against this. And then the Zergs was like, no, you can't nerf the Queen by 0.001 move speed because we can't deal with that anymore. It's always stuff like that. So since there's so many changes, I feel like it's a really good sign that big things are going to happen. We'll just have to see in the test. Maybe usually Wardy runs those. Maybe he will run a nice test tournament so we can see. I'm curious what you guys think as well in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed my quick analysis here. Make sure to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all for the next video. Adios.